This is Jason Reed Pratt, author of Cry of Justice! Have you been wondering when the Crisis Grogs multiplayer team, named after our gathering first to play the board game Time of Crisis by GMT Games, will actually start playing Mark Herman and Volker Runke's board game Fire in the Lake, also published by GMT Games? Me too! Fortunately, we started our game already. And while we're using the Vassal mod, I'm recreating our moves in the Tabletop Simulator mod, which is borrowed from the Vassal mod but looks more 3D-ier. We're going with the full campaign, but have a little accidentally shuffle-built the deck using the non-historical run so that events from the 1965 and 1964 subdecks, for example, may show up next to one another, as indeed with our first two cards. Since I obviously don't know the full order of the half deck of cards we kept randomly for the Vassal game yet, I'll just be pulling them from a sequentially ordered deck for display in the current, upcoming, and discarded piles, based on my foreknowledge of what those cards turned out to be. Turn 1, therefore, is the 301st Supply Battalion event. Historically, this reflects the first North Vietnamese Army crew to use the Ho Chi Minh Trail to infiltrate supplies into South Vietnam. This will either help or hurt the NVA, and as it happens, the NVA and the VC will have first and second initiative. So Dave, playing the NVA, with a recommendation from his more experienced teammate Larry, also known on the Grogheads forum as Aztank, chooses the event, and specifically the shaded flavor, improving the trail by 2 boxes. And adding a die roll of cash to his supply. But he only rolled a 1. Still, he improved his economy in the long run, or at least buffered it a little from any incoming airstrikes which Barthart might throw at it before the first coup card arrives, whenever that is. Here's a quick recap of where the NVA start the long game, if you aren't familiar yet with Fire in the Lake, or haven't watched my prior episodes recently. The NVA doesn't start with any troops on the board, only these, currently hidden, Special Force units, and the large circular bases. They have almost the largest number of offensive and defensive forces in the game, and they're all available and ready to go, but they aren't deployed yet. Aztank Larry, as the Viet Cong, thus gets a chance to play a full operation with a special ability. Let's do a quick recap of his starting positions. As you can see, he doesn't have any cubes on the board either, which represent divisions of troops, roughly speaking. But that's because the VC don't ever get military divisions at all. He does get to start with almost all his bases on the board already, however, and a workable number of hidden special force units. But he needs a lot more of his relatively small pool of specs out on the board so that he'll have more options about doing things. The Viet Cong have the fewest available pieces in the game, only 30 special force groups and 9 bases. Consequently, Larry chooses the rally operation with the tax special ability, a pretty normal first move for the VC. The Viet Cong cannot rally on roads, nor in areas with support for the Saigon regime. He can rally outside South Nam if he's desperate or just really wants to, but it's far more effective to rally somewhere with South Vietnamese population. He has to pay 1 resource for every target area, but he gets to play a full operation, thanks to Dave choosing the card event, so he can rally in as many valid targets as he wants to pay for. Larry chooses Pleiku, Ben Din, and Quang Duc, paying a total of 3 cash, decreasing his resources to only 2 remaining. So he's starting with a focus in the middle of South Nam. Rally is a flexible operation. In targeted areas without any VC base, he can spawn in 1 spec. With or without a base, he can convert 2 specs into a base, planting a base from his available box and sending the specs back to available. In areas which already have a VC base, He can bring in as many specs as the number of his bases plus the population total in that area. He can also flip all specs, in an area which already has a base, back to stealth if any are already active. Since taxing an area activates one spec there, and since special activities can be played at any time during operations, players will sometimes tax an area and then rally the activated spec back underground to keep it from being targeted. But this early in the game, Az wouldn't do that, because you can only target an area once with an operation, and flipping specs to stealth isn't provided as an additional action. It's an either-or choice in a target area. This or that. So Larry chooses to move specs into all the areas first and then tax. Specs always come into an area stealthed, unless some card effect specifies otherwise, I suppose. Ben Din had 2 population, so with its 1 base it got 3 specs. The other areas got 2 specs each. The Viet Cong can tax any 4 areas, including roads, where there is at least 1 hidden spec and no coin control. Larry chooses the 3 areas he rallied in, plus Quang Tin. Taxing always either reduces the VC score by reducing opposition, or raises the US score by increasing support for Saigon, and both results happen here. Quang Duc goes up from active to passive opposition, reducing the VC score by 1 population. They were scoring double the population, and now they only score equal to the pop. Pleiku goes up from neutral to passive support, increasing the US score by 1. Ben Din also goes up from neutral to passive support, increasing the US score by 2 points from the 2 population. And Quang Tin goes up from active to passive opposition, reducing the VC score by 2 points from the 2 population. Larry harvests 12 resources from this, however, twice the population total from all the tax targets, bumping his cash back up from 2 to 14. Note that while you can't target an area more than once for an operation, and typically not more than once for a special mission, you can do a special mission where you've done an operation, unless the rules say otherwise, which will become important for me in my first moves. That ends the turn. Now, turn 2. The active card discards, the upcoming card Election becomes active, and the new upcoming event will be the Masher White Wing operation. The current card designates ARVN, that's me, as the first initiative, and the United States second, played by Barthart, skipping the VC and the NVA as inactive this turn. There's no way to keep the VC from getting first shot at the event next turn, but I could gamble that VC Larry will choose to be busy elsewhere, which does seem likely. Besides, Masher White Wing is an awfully weak event for the US and not a whole lot better for me. I'm going to bet I could put more forces on the board this time than the VC or the NVA can knock off with that event. And this early in the game, I'd almost rather they burn a turn using this event against us than improving their own positions anyway. Notice that the event really should be in the middle of the game, 1965 through 67. The historical event happened in 1966. This is a result of us choosing a non-historical shuffle option in the vassal module. So do I play the election event this turn? This represents the 1967 election of South Nam President Nguyen Van Thieu, which historically caused more trouble due to lots of evidence that he had manipulated the vote, even if not as much manipulation as the first ARVN President Ngo Dinh Diem, who by the way was killed off in a coup before the game starts and replaced by my first regime leader in the game, Duong Van Minh. Despite the shadiness of the vote manipulation, Van Thieu stabilized the political situation of South Nam until the end of the war. The clean vote flavor directly helps the US score and boosts my eventual cash from the US, but I think I'm going to recommend that Bart take the event on his turn, and I'll instead play a full operation on my turn with a special mission. Given a chance, I always prefer to build economy early in any game, and that's true as ARVN too. In fact, until the first coup, I'm even given our economic boosts for doing an operation which also allows me to improve my economy. That's thanks to my first regime leader, who gives me a special power to add to my aid anytime I choose a training operation. My valid targets are any of my cities, or any province with a Team South base, which are only US bases right now and limited to this one in Pleiku. In one training space, I can also convert 3 of my cubes to one of my bases, But notice that I can only place forces in that space if I already have a Team South base there. This kind of requires me to put bases in cities where they don't help much, or out where the U.S. already has a base, or I have to have already moved enough troops into a province to matter, which I don't start with this early in the game. I can also pacify up to 2 levels if I pay for it, in an area where I paid to train. But I want to be careful about where I select for training because I'm going to choose Govern as my special mission, and I can't govern anywhere that I have trained, including where I raised my support already. Whew. Unfortunately for me, the United States doesn't start with a base in a province that already has coin control, and I don't start with any bases on the board at all, so I'm limited to training in my cities right now. For reasons I'll explain a little later, I'm going to choose 2 cities for training, Canton and Hue. Each target costs me 3 cash each, so I'll go down from 30 to 24. For that, I'll put 6 cubes into each city, 3 each of yellow and of orange, which are the military and police divisions respectively. In Hue, I'll pay another 6 cash to pacify it by 2 levels, 3 cash per level, raising its support from neutral to active support. This will decrease my cash to 18, but increases the US score from 41 to 45. It will also help inoculate the area better from Team North interference. Finally, for my special action, which could have been done any time in this sequence, I'll govern Kien Hua and An Lok, my maximum number of govern targets, and 2 areas I have not trained in. Govern gives me the option of being a fair or corrupt ruler, and I'll most likely have to govern eventually in a way that converts public support and my cash to corrupt patronage in order to raise my score. But this early in the game, I'll be a good governor, which only has good effects, increasing my aid by 3 times the population. You can see why I picked Kien Hua for this. It's the only spot on the board that I haven't trained in this turn with support, coin control, and 2 population. And which isn't Saigon, which for game balance reasons is always invalid to govern. So my aid goes up from 15 as a start, plus 3 times 2 population equals 6, plus 3 times 1 population equals 3, to 24. Plus another 5 points to 29 because I trained this turn, and that's a special ability from my regime leader. That isn't cash I can use yet, which is still down at 18, but it's coming. Now, I can legally throw out up to 6 cubes in each selected training space. However, because I'm playing against a new player, who is Dave playing the NVA, I'm going to voluntarily limit myself, at the beginning anyway, to only training up to a total of 6 cubes. So I'll take back 3 cubes from each of my 2 training target areas, 2 police, and 1 troop each. And restack my availables to be neat. That ends my turn, and for episode balance I'll stop on my turns usually, so it's now their turns for doom. Doom, 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 doom,